So look, I'll be honest, this idea is not one that I came up with myself. Blatantly stole from HITC Sevens. Great football channel. If you're into football, check those guys out. Looking at the current F1 grid, but rewinding 7 years on each individual and looking at where they are. As much as these are all people who are currently holding what you could argue are the 20 most lucrative seats in motorsport, 7 years ago, they were all in very, very different places. Now, specifically, if we go exactly 7 years back from when I'm filming this video, we'd have had the Australian, Malaysian, and the Chinese Grand Prix. Bahrain would be next. So again, when I talk about the drivers who are in F1 7 years ago, I'll talk about them up to that point. Let's have a look at Lewis Hamilton. 28-year-old Lewis Hamilton. I can't believe Lewis is 35. He looks incredible for a 35-year-old. Now, of course, if you know maths, 7 years ago from this year is 2013, which of course was Lewis's debut season at what was, at the time, a pretty unproven Mercedes team. Although we say that, in his very, very, very first race at Australia, he qualified third and finished fifth, which is pretty good considering the amount of flack he was getting when he left McLaren to join Mercedes. And then the next race, he got his first podium, finishing third in Malaysia. And then at China, it got even better. He put it on pole and finished third, which again, like now, when you look at it, isn't great. But bear in mind, the team he was joining at the time was, a pretty unproven Mercedes. He couldn't have got in at a better time, let's be honest. And then, of course, there's Valtteri Bottas, 23-year-old Valtteri Bottas at the time. His first season of any in Formula One in the Williams alongside Pastor Maldonado. Unfortunately, by this time, after 3 races in, Bottas hadn't picked up any points. His closest was 11th place at Malaysia. So, Ferrari. We've got Sebastian Vettel, 25 years old at the time. And as I'm sure you know, 2013 was the year he won his 4th and final driver's title. To be confirmed, he might win another one. Don't hate me. And yeah, it was a solid start. He came third in Australia, he won in Malaysia, and he came 4th in China. And this 2013 season ended up being his most dominant because he pretty much won all of the last 4 or 5 races. So yeah, Seb was 25 7 years ago. Charles was 15. He was literally a child. And he's the first in this list of people who obviously weren't anywhere near F1 at this time, like 7 years ago. It was his final year competing in karting. He won the South Garda Winter Cup and finished second in the CIK FIA World KZ Championship behind a familiar face that we'll divulge in a little bit. Next, we have the Red Bull boys, starting with Alex Albon. 7 years ago, he was 17 years of age and had just joined the KTR team within the Formula Renault 2.0 Super Cup, Euro Cup, series. Now, some of you might know he had a bit of a rocky start in his early career, and 2013 wasn't particularly special. He finished 16th out of 36 drivers on the grid and managed 1 pole position at the Red Bull Arena in Austria. But that was it. Then we've got 15-year-old Max Verstappen. His season was pretty good. And I say that with a degree of sarcasm because he just won everything he competed in at junior level max. So in 2013, he won the European KF and KZ spec championships. There's lots of different specs in karting. And that familiar face to beat Charles in 2013 was, of course, Max. We know that rivalry has existed for a long time, and in 2013 it was alive and true. Now for Carlos Sainz. Carlos was 18 7 years ago and had just signed in GP3 with Arden, the team that's co-owned by Christian Horner, and obviously the Red Bull driver link made sense. Now Carlos didn't do amazingly well, to be fair. He finished 10th in the GP3 season, and there was another current F1 driver who actually won that. But again, I will divulge shortly. And again, guess. Let me know in the comments down below. Who do you think that might be without checking? Don't use Google. Here we are. Meme lord, that is Lando Norris, was 13 7 years ago. Little baby Lando. He looked like a small boy. He was a small boy. But he had a mean streak on him when it came to getting in the old kart. So in 2013, he won the WSK Euro Series in the KFJ spec, and he won the CIK FIA European Championship in the KF Junior spec. Lots of acronyms in karting. I don't really understand them, but he won stuff. Renault boys, Daniel Ricciardo, he was 23 7 years ago. Danny Rick, and it was his second season in Toro Rosso. As for the 2013 start of the season, first 3 races, obviously he retired from Australia. That's just what Daniel kind of does. And he retired from Malaysia as well, so not a great start. But he did pick up 7th in the Toro Rosso at China, which is a pretty solid result for the team at the time because they were very much lingering at the bottom. Daniel's teammate for this season, Esteban Ocon, he was 16 7 years ago. Young Esteban. He joined the ART Junior team in Formula Renault 2.0 Eurocup in 2013. Overall, he finished the Eurocup season in 3rd, but yet again, another F1 driver in this list took that title. And again, guess below, who do you think it is? Also, is it Ocon or Ocon? I'm not sure. Let me know above. So, the Alpha Tauri Formula 1 team, Daniel Kvyat, 18 years old, he was 7 years ago, and he was the man who, when Carlos finished 10th in the GP3 Championship, Danny Kvyat smashed it. He comfortably won, was 30 points clear of his next rival, and he was Carlos's teammate, because of course they were both Red Bull Young Academy drivers. He then went on to race in European F3 later in this year. He couldn't complete the whole calendar, so he didn't actually score any points, but his results were very impressive, and that's where Helmut Marko saw him. He won comfortably in Zandvoort and was like, "You're in the Toro Rosso next year, son." Then we had Pierre Gasly, 17 years old. He was running in the Euro Cup alongside Esteban Ocon. Ocon finished 3rd. Pierre Gasly finished numero uno. He was representing the Tech 1 racing team. He won 3 times all season, and he clinched the title by 16 points in the end. Racing points, and we have Sergio Perez. He was 23 7 years ago. 2013 was his maiden season at McLaren. Of course, Lewis had gone from McLaren to Mercedes. Sergio went from Sauber to McLaren to fill that gap. He was subsequently let go from his Ferrari driver academy role because obviously Ferrari and McLaren is not that doesn't go together. Sergio actually caught a lot of flack. He's well established as being one of the most consistent and dependable F1 drivers now, but back here, he was ruffling some feathers. He was teammates with Jenson Button, and Jenson's a very calm and he's not one to create drama, I don't think anyway. But he had some choice words for Sergio after a few a bit desperate and overly aggressive lunges on his teammate. And then at Monaco, he had a coming together with Button, with Alonso, and then Kimi, which is where the famous line, "I want to hit him when I see him," came from Kimi's mouth. That was directed at Sergio. And again, by this stage, 3 races in, his only points finish was a 9th place at Malaysia. He didn't pick up any points at Australia or China. They were both 11th. So close, but so far. And then Sergio's teammate, Lance Stroll, was 14 years old. We forget he's the second youngest driver on the grid, Lance. He's only 14. He's only a little baby still. The poster boy of paid drivers, of course, was karting 7 years ago. And he participated in a number of championships over the year, with standouts being 5th place in the WSK Supermaster Series in the KF spec, 6th place in the CIK FIA World Championship in the KF spec. That's the same championship where Max finished 3rd. So Lance 6th, Max 3rd. Max is like top don. Lance ain't a mile off, you know what I mean? He's not a proper backmarker. Kimi Räikkönen, he was 33 7 years ago, and he was at the Lotus Renault team. Kimi won the very first race of the 2013 season in Australia in the Lotus Renault. He actually had a really solid start to the year. He took 2nd in China as well. So that package was clearly very competitive. It didn't last to the end of the season because Seb whipped it. Antonio Giovinazzi, 19 years old, 7 years ago. He joined the F3 European Championships in 2013 and finished 17th overall, which is nothing major to write home about. He did have more luck in the British F3 though. He tried that out later in the year, finishing 2nd overall. Romain Grosjean was 26 years old 7 years ago. And actually, to be fair, I've been very critical of Romain over recent years, but 2013 was arguably his very, very best season in Formula 1. He finished 7th overall. The start of the season was okay. He finished 10th, 6th and 9th respectively in those first 3 races of the season. Now we've got K-Mag. He was 27 years ago, which is the same age as me. He's the only F1 driver who would have been the same school year as me at school, and he's not even considered a young driver anymore, which makes me very sad. And actually, K-Mag had a banging 2013. He smashed it. He won the 2013 Formula Renault 3.5 series, beating out Stoffel Van Dorn by 60 points. So pretty dominant. And there was a few other notable drivers as well competing that year. You had Carlos Sainz Jr., Sergei Sorokin, and Antonio Felix da Costa, all in that year. And then we got the Williams boys. George Russell, he was 15 years old 7 years ago. George was frighteningly successful in his early days, but 2013 was probably the biggest dip, because even George, who pretty much smashed it and pretty much won everything he did, this year wasn't the best year. He finished 13th in the CIK FIA European Championship KF spec, which Max actually won. And then he finished 19th in the CIK FIA World Championship, which was one position behind Lando Norris's brother, Oliver, who, if you don't know, was actually, he was a bigger racer than Lando back in the day in terms of the karting. And then Oliver kind of knocked it on the head and Lando kept going and is now in F1. His best result was a 5th place in the WSK Euro Series, a series in which Lance Stroll and Callum Ilott drove, and they finished 13th and 14th respectively, so 5th is pretty good, but again, by the standards that George proceeded to set, not his best year. And then last, but by no means least, Nicholas Latifi was 17 years old 7 years ago. He'd already made it into open wheel racing by this stage. He wasn't in karting anymore. In the European F3 Championship though, he finished 15th from 36, which is good, but it's not quite karting. He then moved over to the British F3, fared better, finished 5th, which was one place ahead of the GT Academy winner, Jan Mardenborough. I never know how to pronounce his surname. Mardenborough. And that's the year that Giovinazzi finished 2nd. So there we go. That's all 20 drivers. I think in terms of the most impressive, looking at the numbers and how they did in karting, George, Max, obviously Max, but George really solid. Daniel Kvyat as well. He smashed it. He seemed to be really on it as a youngster. And then the drivers who didn't look so impressive, Carlos Sainz Jr., who's I rate is one of the best now. He didn't have the best. Alex, we kind of know, struggled as well. A lot of these guys, it wasn't like a clear route smashing it from day one. Again, it's only really George and Max. And then Daniel's had his hardships later on down the line. So it's not straightforward getting into F1, is it? But there you go. Whose story did you find the most interesting? Because I learned quite a bit about these drivers. Quite an interesting video to make. Let me know down in the comments below. Anyway, thank you as ever for watching. Please don't forget to drop a like on this video if you've enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're new and you want to see more content just like this. I would much appreciate it. My name's been Tommo. This is the Tommo F1 YouTube channel. Thank you so much as ever again for watching. Have a good one. Ta-da.